Hi everyone, welcome to 20 minutes of code. I better start the timer. Cool, so this video is the first one of a series and we're going to be creating a weather application. We'll be using things such as Python, Flask. Later on we'll be deploying it using infrastructure as cloud, up to the cloud, so it's not just running locally on our computer, but it's accessible anywhere on the internet. And we'll be using code editors, which is awesome, and the OpenWeather API, for which you'll need an API key for, but not to worry, we'll get there eventually. Cool, so to get started, if you're on Windows, you'll need a terminal. I'll be using Git Bash for Windows. You'll also need a code editor. So some popular ones are VS Code, which is what I'll be using today. It works on both Mac and Windows. And Sublime Text is also pretty popular. If I haven't mentioned your favorite editor, then I'm sorry, but I've just picked out these two. For your Mac, the terminal will be based in Spotlight Search, and you just type in terminal. Some code editors like VS Code also have the terminal built in, which you can use completely fine. Cool, so I'm just on my desktop, and I'm going to make a directory. I'll call it Python Weather, and then I'm just going to enter this new folder that I've created. Cool. And now I'm going to use this shortcut here to open my code editor. If it doesn't work on your machine, that's fine. Just open the new folder somewhere on your machine that you've created in your code editor. As you can see, it's empty. There's no files. So we're just going to create one. I'll call it server.py. And our first goal here is to just have a URL that we can type in and we see hello world. So we'll be using Flask for this, and we'll have to get that installed. But firstly, we'll just write the import statement here. Oops. So as you can see, there's an error, and it says, hey, I can't find the package Flask, which makes sense. So what we'll do here, if we do a pip list, you can see I've actually got a lot of things installed globally on my machine, and it can get quite messy. So what we'll be doing for this video is we'll be using a virtual environment, so that keeps all your dependency packages nice and clean. So we'll type in Python m virtual environment env. You'll see it's made this new folder, plus I'll get a prompt down here. Just give that a moment. Cool. And now we're going to activate it. And you can see here I'm now in the env environment. So if I run pip list, remember before it had all of this other output. You can see I'm now in a fresh contained environment. So now it's safe for me to install Flask. Well, it's safe either way, but I'm now proceeding to install Flask. So if I do a pip list, you can see I've got Flask, plus it comes with other dependent packages, which is okay. It needs those to run. Awesome. So what we'll be doing now is creating our Flask app. Flask. Double underscore name. So that means we're going to have to name it. And then we'll create a route, which will just be /. And when that route is hit, we want to run the hello world function. And it's just going to return a string, which you need double quotes for. I'll close that p tag, oops, and close the string. Cool, that's all happy. You'll notice when I saved it, my formatter, which I'm using, it just gave it a bit more spacing. But if yours only has one space, it will run completely fine. So Flask is still not resolved here, and it's because my default Python environment is being used in my code editor. So I'm going to change to my env virtual environment. And now you can see it's going to work. Cool. Stick with formatter. Awesome. Now what I'm going to do is create an environment file. And inside here, we'll just have some environment variables. So I've forgotten what they are off the top of my head, but I've got them here. Cool. So the first one, Flask app, we actually have to point it to this file here. So you can see it's got script. That would work if my file was called script.py, but this one is server. And then I've just got the development environment set. You can, later on when this is deployed, you can change that to production, but this will do for now. Cool. And now we should be able to Flask run. So here it's saying, I could not locate your application. You didn't provide the environment variable, blah, blah, blah. I've actually got it in here. So there's just something we need to do first to resolve this, and that's to install python-env. So pip install, and this package will make it recognize, hey, there's a .env here. I need to use the values inside that. So we'll just try Flask run. Cool. So you can see it's happy. So it's serving our Flask app called server, which makes sense. That's our file name. And it's running at this address here. So the 127.0.0.1 is actually the same as localhost. And this number at the end is the port that it's running on. So if we go to our web browser and if we type in localhost 5000, we can't see anything. It's saying the requested URL was not found, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that means our URL is actually not working. So we'll just head back to the code. And it's because we're missing the decorator symbol. I should have noticed before. So my formatter actually moved that up. So that's a downside of using code formatters sometime, because it moved it so far up. I forgot to actually check that we had the decorator there. Cool. So because it's in development mode, you'll see when I save the file, it's actually reloaded. And now we can see hello world. If we go to another path like test, you can see we get the same not found. But with the knowledge you've just gained, you'll realize that we could actually do test like that, and then it works on that. Cool, but for now we'll leave it as home. So what we'll want is to actually make an API call. Now that we've verified everything works, this is quite a good way to make sure that, hey, something is actually working. We can start development. So let's create a route that we'll call current. And this intention for this is to actually return the current weather for our location, which will be cool. We won't add the try-in yet, so in Python there's quite a few ways to make API calls. For the purposes of this video, we'll just be using requests. It's pretty common, and you'll see it in quite a few places. So in here we need our API URL plus other things. You don't need to write that for now. And then what we'll have is we will return the response as JSON. So we need to install requests. So back to the terminal, Control-C will close you'll see here Control-C to quit. I think on Mac it's just going to be Command-C. Cool. So install requests. Awesome. And we need to import it because you can see it's still not happy. All right, so yep, that's all linked up. Turn r.json. Cool, so the only thing that's missing is what API URL do we want to hit. So to find that, you can head over to openweathermap.org, and I've just got my default key here, which I'll edit or delete later. I don't really need this account. You'll need to sign up. So if you create a profile and then you click once you've logged in and go to My API Keys, you'll come to this page here and you'll be able to see all of the API keys under your account. And if you head to the API page, we want current weather, so click API doc. Cool. And honestly, they give you all the examples here. You can just copy paste. If you need more information, it tells you. If you don't know what app ID is, it says, hey, it's your API key. So that's awesome. City ID. So they actually give you a list that you can download to find your city ID. or you can do it by name and country, which is cool. So we'll head back to the code. I better grab that key. Cool. So I'll add that in the environment variables. Just called it API key. And so to access that, we actually want to import OS. And we'll create a constant. Cool. So we'll grab the API key environment variable and assign it to the API key. Even though this is a constant, you can actually change it in Python, but using capital letters lets other developers know, hey, this is a constant, you probably shouldn't change it. Something else I like to do is create a base URL. So we can enter in the API URL, which is api.openweathermap.org data, and it's at 2.5. If it's different at the time you're doing this, this is all in the documentation on their website, where we were at before. So you can see here 2.5. Cool. So you can see here we're accessing the weather endpoint, and then we have a query string here, which is q equals city name, app ID is your API key. So we'll grab that. And what we'll do here, you can see I've got an F in front of the string. That just saves us from going weather plus API key plus, and then going back into a string. And I'll show you how the F string works soon. It's known as a template string in JavaScript, and I feel like it just keeps things pretty clean. So you can use curly braces like that to say, grab the base URL that we've defined here and plant it inside the string. Cool. So it was the weather endpoint. I'll just write that one out. And then after that, it was question mark q equals, and then we need city. So we can define city. By defining it like this, it will just make things easy to change in the future. If someone says, hey, I don't live in Wellington, I live in Auckland, it's that simple. You won't need to worry about the actual implementation. Well, that's the idea anyway. Sometimes in practice, that's not quite the case. Cool. And then app ID equals API key. We could just access this inside here, but just for cleanliness, I'll assign it, because if this fails, then we'll find out pretty soon, instead of having to hit this endpoint. All right, I think that's it. So we'll head back. Last run. Cool, that's a good start. And then we called it, I think it was current. Cool. So you can see this is the JSON response. JSON just means the format of the data. So you can see we've got temperature, Wellington, it's going to rain, well, chance of rain, I'm in New Zealand, blah, blah, blah. Cool, that's nice. So that's the first route done. What we'll do next is we'll get the forecast, just to show you a different route using OpenWeather API, but by all means feel free to read their documentation and pick another endpoint if you find that more interesting. Turn request.get, and then we'll do the F string, base URL, slash. So this is using a different endpoint. So it's one call, it takes latitude, and it also takes long equals, and then it also takes the API key. Where's my end? And app ID equals API key. Cool, so I'll just define these up here. Oh, lat, lon. Cool, so that and that. I actually don't know what these are, which is fine. So lat and long of Wellington. Cool. Hopefully I'm grabbing these values in the right order. So now we'll just write that in here and in here. So they'll be injected into the string. So what I've done here is I'm actually returning the API call, which is not really what we want, because I'll show you what happens. So that's restarted. So we called this one forecast. Yep. So I'm expecting it to blow up. So it's saying here, you've given me a response object, but I want a string dictionary tuple. And that's because we'll just put on that to convert it to JSON. Oh, I assume it's reloaded. Hey, there we go. So you can see we've now got a daily weather array, which will have lots of cool information in there. There's 1, 2, heavy intensity rain. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Light rain, light rain. Yep, it's going to be a great week coming up. But today it is clear sky, which is cool. Sweet, so that's all working. Now, what I want to show you next, if we have time, I guess so. Maybe, I think that only just started. Cool, hopefully we've got time. So I just want to explain that sometimes things don't always go to plan. This API call might fail. So what you can do is wrap it in a try statement. So you're pretty much saying, Python, can you please try this? And if it fails, let me know. And the request library on the response object, you can call a method raise for status, and that will raise an exception if the status code is not a good one. So if it's not a 200 status code. And then we'll just need to catch the exception. So what you could do is use a generic exception, but I've got one that I want to show you, which is quite interesting. So it's best practice to use more specific exception types. So you can see here I'm using one from the actual requests package. And you can do multiple, there'll be different exception types in here. So you can see them here. So you can choose one that's suitable for the errors that you think you may run into, and then you can handle them here. So we'll just return a string, and it will just say error, and I'll just put in the error object. So what we've done here is caught the exception, assigned it to error, and then we're going to say, hey, error will come back. To make that happen, I'll just mangle the URL and go to my /current. Oh, HTTP error. Okay, so I got a different error. That's fine. Cool. Error 404, client error, not found URL, blah, blah, blah. Awesome. I think the one I was trying to catch, instead of mangling the endpoint, I think I did mangle something else. But you can see there's different types of errors to be handled. So we could just do this. Awesome. So that's our error handling. Everything's looking fine. Just double check the code. Yep, and I think that's it. I'm not sure if my timer failed, but hopefully this is within 20 minutes. Join me for the next episode where we will actually add a front-end UI, which will use the data that comes back from our API, and we'll do some cool stuff there. All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. I'll catch you in the next one.